Joining me in the studios, I have Dr. Itia Manot-Late from the University of Education, Winneba, from the Political Science Department, and also Mr. Vitus Azim is the former Executive Director of the Ghana Integrity Initiative. Good morning, and thank you so much for joining us. We're grateful that you could make the time to join us to discuss very important issues concerning the elections. I want to start off, first of all, picking your thoughts on the campaign process so far and what you make of the various political parties and the work they've put into campaigning to ensure that they get the votes that they require. I'll start off with you, sir.
Thank you, Bella, and good morning. Well, when we look at the campaign process, looking at COVID-19 and the impact it had on face-to-face campaigning over the period, we realized that from the beginning it was more of television ads, it was more of radio ads, the use of social media. But getting to the end of November, then we saw a lot of engagement of candidates and citizens. So we saw campaigns, we saw them moving in the towns around. So COVID-19 had an impact, but see that it picked momentum getting to the end of November.
Still in the studios with me, I have Dr. Itia Manot-Late from the Political Science Department of the University of Education, Winneba, and Mr. Vitus Azim, who was former Executive Director of the Ghana Integrity Initiative, which is an anti-corruption CSO. And we're talking about campaign, the build-up to the December 7 elections. We're finally here, but what do they make of the campaign process so far? And I'll come to you, Mr. Vitus Azim, because I want to understand, you at a point had said that, the political party should desist from responding to negative comments and controversies and focus on their policies, more like it. Looking at what they have been able to do over the period, do you think that they focused more on that? And are you satisfied with the work they've done?
Well, I think they adopted the two. They tried to focus on the issues, making promises, some of which I saw as too ambitious, not practical. But they also, I think most of them they did not pay attention to what they put in their manifestos. It looked like there was no reference to the issues that they put in their manifestos. And so you ask yourself, what was the essence of producing political party manifesto if you not pay attention to it? And even if you try to download the manifestos, they are so bulky. The NPP manifesto was 246 pages, full of pictures of what you have achieved. But you see, a manifesto is supposed to tell you what you are going to do if we give you another term. It's not what you have done. It's good to say, yeah, you've done this, you've achieved this. But what is the next step?
Okay.
So the pictures made the thing so bulky, difficult even to download on internet. NDC too the same. They had 146, maybe being in opposition. But they also put a lot of pictures there and made a lot of promises, most of which I felt they were just too many and not practical. This was continued in the campaigns. They kept promising things that did not even appear first in the manifestos, reacting to each other's campaign promises. And I think that was not the best.
Okay.
The other side was looking at each other as individuals. Deal with the issues. But it was now like NDC, these people are not reliable, these people are reliable. I thought that the presidential candidates should have avoided that language. Language that appeared offensive, that kind of thing. Now you cannot be trusted. I thought that those things at least should be left to the ordinary party supporters to talk about and not the presidential candidates. So that wise, I thought that they didn't do well.
Okay. Well, Doctor, I'll come to you shortly, but let me still ask Mr. Vitus Azim. You mentioned some overambitious, promises that were made, policies that you thought were a bit over the top. Can you touch on some of these policies that you think were overambitious?
One of them, for example, we are still fighting about free SHS and the double track system. Then you're already promising, ND has already promised, free tertiary education. I thought that was overambitious in the next 4 years. Because when we started talking about free HSS, we were saying that it was not possible, it was not workable in this country, we needed to go beyond. Now we haven't yet streamlined, we haven't finalized the free HSS system because there are a lot of problems that we need to address. And then we're already talking about free tertiary. I think that's an ambitious promise. There's also free primary health care. You see, what are our sources of revenues that we think that we can do all these things in the next 4 years? So those are some of the things that I say they are ambitious. Of course, then you talk about the operations thing.
Yeah.
Which, again, I think, until I see it happen, I don't believe that it can happen.
But this falls at your doorstep.
Yes.
We'll come to it shortly. We'll come to operations thing because I want you to touch on the issue of corruption over the last 4 years, maybe. But Doc, coming to you, I mean, Mr. Vitas Azim said that the fact that they introduced the free tertiary education just days before December 7 was over-ambitious. But when you look at the EC's voters registers list and we look at the number of youth that make up the list, that's about 55.5% of the total number. And so could that not have been the reason why? And again, yesterday we established that maybe the political parties saw this a little late, because if they had information about the number of youth that would register, especially even first-time voters, that represents about 15%, maybe they would have considered some of these promises in their manifesto. What do you say to this?
Well, if political parties will have to wait for the EC to release the data of voters before they are able to come up with policies for us, then I think that the political parties, their research departments are not up to scratch. But looking at a policy like free tertiary education, I agree with Mr. Vice Azim that it is overambitious. It is true that the chunk of our voting population are young people. They are between the ages of 18 and 35, yeah. Over 50%. It is okay. But the point is that if we promise free university education, free tertiary education, is it possible within the time frame that we have? We have free SHS, an excellent policy, but if you look at it, there are some few things we need to have, the fine-tuning need to be done to that particular policy. So why, as a society, why don't you concentrate on strengthening what we have started? You promise free primary health care. It would be excellent for us to have free primary health care. But do we have, number one, do we have the resources to be able to back these things up? If we don't have the resources and we keep promising, then what will happen is that the electorates very soon will lose faith in our politicians. But we need to have faith in them. We need to have faith in their leadership. We need to have faith in the system. When these promises come, a lot of promises that are largely unfulfilled, what it does is that it doesn't only discredit the politicians, but it also discredits the institutions, because you know that policies are implemented through these institutions. So the promising, objectively looking at the promises, the promising spree, it has not been too good. It is part of our politics. It has been part of our party politics for some time. It is not going anytime soon. But I think that politicians should come up with some policies that will appeal to the people, that are also practical, that could be implemented should they be voted to power. Are
there any policies that you think are good from both manifestos and, of course, from the other minority parties as well?
Yes. From the minority party, talking about technical education, stressing technical education, that would be an excellent policy. We need to strengthen the technical sector. That will help build the nation. It is good if we have that one implemented. That would be okay. If a policy like the free basic health care, that would be an excellent policy. But we are looking at the feasibility. That is where I have a little problem. That looking at the short to medium term, it is not feasible for us to have free basic health care. It would be good we have it. It would be an excellent policy, but I don't see it being implemented within the short term.
Okay, Mr. Vitas Azim, let's talk now about corruption. Like I said earlier, that sits at your doorstep, and it's something you're very passionate about. It's interesting to note that heavily contended political science department of the University of Ghana polls that came out did indicate that when they interacted with the sample, corruption did not play a major role as some of the key determinants as to why they're going to cast their ballot today. Were you surprised by that? And looking at what has happened in the last 4 years, what do you say about the fight against corruption in the country?
You see, with regards to polls, social research, there can usually be problems with it. where you go to get your sample, the people you talk to, their thinking, especially with regards to politics. Now, one of the issues that has made corruption not an issue is because of the political parties. As I said, the NPP did not speak about corruption in their manifesto, 2020 manifesto. All they did was to say, this is what we promised to do, we have done them. In some cases, they just write, done. But that's not the point of a manifesto. So they have not led the discussion on corruption. And for me, I think because they have failed to address it properly. And so if they raise it, they will not be able to respond appropriately to attract voters.
Okay.
And that's why the NDC took advantage of it, to talk more about corruption. But unfortunately, it depends on how the media also reports these things. Because if the media reports it regularly, then people will think about it, people will see the negative effects of corruption, and then say, oh, let's use this as it should be an issue in the elections. Unfortunately, it hasn't happened that way. The media, in most cases, most media tend to go the side of the ruling government, not only under this government. So the media has not led that discussion. Civil society has been very, very serious about corruption. The scandals and all, the civil society has led the way. And the media should have helped, but I don't think the media has done enough. Especially a media and sometimes divided. You come out with a serious scandal and one side comes out to defend it. And then they put fake news, counteract what the allegations. And so even the ordinary citizens find it difficult to determine whether it is actually an issue or not. And I think that's why it is not considered an issue in the elections.
Okay.
But I think that serious-minded Ghanaians should see it as an issue.
Okay.
Because no matter what you promise, no matter what you do, no matter how much resources you want to use, if you don't use it properly, if some of it gets leaked into private pockets, definitely you cannot succeed. So a school that you could have built maybe with half the cost, you have built 2 schools with a certain amount, now you put only into 1 school. So definitely you could do better.
Yeah, definitely.
And we haven't been able to do that. So that is the thing. And you are talking about the past 4 years. Some of them, they are in the public domain. There may be allegations we haven't investigated, but the Ajapa deal, for us in civil society, we thought that there was something wrong with it.
Okay.
The PDS deal, the fact that it was abrogated, clearly shows that they themselves admitted that there was something wrong with it. And there were other investigations that you don't come out with the results.
Okay.
Or you just keep the report to yourself. These are serious issues. If you set up a committee to investigate an issue, it means that you have accepted it as a serious matter.
Okay.
So you need to take action on it. If you don't take action on it, then what is the point? You wasted the resources, you wasted the time of the people. There are certain important people in this country. We respect them so much. If they do something for you, they expect they should be able to deal with it.
But still in the studios with us, Mr. Vitus Azim is the former executive director of the Ghana Integrity Initiative, and also Dr. E.T. Amano Lati, University of Education, Winneba, Political Science Department. We're just talking about corruption, and we were almost just hitting the nail on the head with regards to the issue of Mr. Domlevo and when he was asked to proceed on leave. You had mentioned immediately after that statement was put out that he was set up, it looked as if he was set up to fail so he can be pushed out. Do you still stand by those? What do you make of it? You were just about to comment on that.
No, I didn't say that Domlevo was set up to fail. No, maybe we said it with regards to the special prosecutor. But I believe that Mr. Domlevo was pushed out. Pushed out, okay. Because of what he was doing at the time. And that was unfortunate. Because this is somebody that was following things, audit reports, doing audits that were unraveling a lot of improper things, and even went to court on some of these issues. And only for you to say that, oh, he has got accumulated leave since he took over, so he should go on leave. 1, you are interfering with the independence of the Auditor General. 2, how many public officials have you asked to proceed on leave? When we know that they are there, that they haven't gone on leave, for some of them up to 10 years. They wait until when they go on retirement, then they accumulate they give all this to them. You go spend about 6 months before you actually go on retirement. So why pick on him? Is it not because of the corruption that he was fighting? Okay. That was my problem with him. When you move to Office of Special Prosecutor, the same thing. You set up the institution, very welcomed by many people. You put somebody that we thought, yes, is going to do the work. But you have to resource the person to be able to do the work. You have to grant the person some amount of independence to be able to do the work. And this has not been the situation.
Okay. But the NDC...
2018, there was no budget, even though the law was passed towards the end of 2017. So there should have been a budget for that institution in 2018. There was no budget. After he was appointed in February, it took up to July before they set up the board. And until he left, kept complaining about having seconded investigators. Only an office in Accra. You cannot compare that office to other offices like that SRAG has and Iroko. They have district, regional and district offices. So how do you expect an office like that to perform?
Do you think that the NDC has capitalized on this as much? You mentioned earlier that unfortunately they've also not been able to do much, but they announced Operation Sting and the fact that they're going to ensure that any official who becomes corrupt will be prosecuted. They talked about making sure that you declare your assets before you go into power and all of that. Is that enough for the fight against corruption?
You see, some of these things, they are meant to get votes. Making sure you declare assets. We have been fighting, when I was at GI, we have been fighting with the parliamentarians to pass the regulations that will allow the Auditor General to even open the declarations and look at them. Both sides would not agree. If I take a blank sheet of paper, fold it and put it on an envelope and go and tell the Auditor General, this is my asset declaration, he is obliged to give me a receipt saying that he has received my asset declaration. It doesn't make sense. What if it's an empty piece of paper? So they were in power. What did they do about it? What should convince us that this time is going to be different? You see, so that is the problem with such things. And I was talking about the Office of Special Prosecutor, the lack of resources for it to work. And it's not only just that office. SRAG has often complained. Now, I think recently the commissioner says that, oh, things were okay. But even that, there are still problems. The lawyers who have got experience there have left because they think that their salaries are not adequate. So when you establish an institution that is supposed to fight corruption, you must not only equip the institution as an institution, but you must also handle the workers very well, pay them reasonably such that they will be convinced to stay. They will not be attracted by the private sector or other institutions that are paying better. This has not been the situation with our anti-corruption institutions, not just under this government, but previous governments as well.
Okay. Dr. Emmanuel Latis.
But if you don't mind, I just want to say something about the ambitious thing. I forgot to add extending free access to private schools.
That's an ambitious promise?
An unnecessary promise.
Unnecessary?
Yes.
Why do you tag it as unnecessary?
Why would you go to international, people have money, if I have money to pay my child, dollars for my child to go to international school, the government can say, oh, I'll pay for it.
But Mr. Vitas, it's not only about international schools. There are private institutions that were also saying that they wanted to at least benefit from this.
And that goes back even when the fee was first introduced. Some of us thought that they should have been targeting, not just make it broad like that. And that's one of the reasons why this thing has encountered a lot of problems. It's not everybody that needs free exercise. A minister, a parliamentarian. For example, I don't think, I'm not rich, but I don't think I couldn't pay my children's school fees. So when you start something and you just make it so open for political capital, at the end of the day, you encounter a lot of problems.
Yeah.
You see.
Could that be the same mistake that they are making with the promise of free tertiary?
I think so.
Again, they've opened it up to everyone else.
I think it's the same mistake. The other side of it, the opposite side of it is that if you promise to do certain things, you must look at the source of revenue. What are they going to do to reduce expenditures in certain areas so that the money will now go into these free things that we are promising?
Okay.
Are we going to reduce minister salaries? Are we going to stop buying V8s, giving ministers and saloon cars as well? Are we going to continue to provide free accommodation, light, water to ministers and all that? You should, if you are really serious about making life easy for the ordinary people, you have to make life a bit difficult for the rich people, those in high levels.
Okay.
This doesn't show in any of the manifestos.
Well, the NDC, in responding to some of these, said that already the president appointed too many ministers and deputy ministers. And so if we're looking at where we can get funds to support free tertiary, one of them would be to cut down on the number of ministers, because we can retrieve some money from that aspect and, you know, invest in it. And a few other places as well. The NPP already had announced an 80 million Ghana cedis budget for scholarships sometime in August. And so they are saying that there was money already set aside, because 20 million of that money is going into the scholarships for the free SHS graduates. And for them, that's money that was already allocated. And so they do have the funds. What do you say about that briefly? And then I'll bring
Yes, but as I said, that they were acting to each other's promises. Some of them are not planned. Because you heard NPP say something on one platform, you go and counteract it. And these don't go into implementation. They are just language to court votes.
Okay.
For me, this must be documented in your manifestos, and we'll be told how you are going to do it, the sources of revenue or income, how you're going to do it. That will be convincing. Okay. But if you go on the political platform and make these promises, some of them, I think that they're not the best. And
unnecessary. Dr. Manolate, what role do you think corruption would play in the casting of votes today, looking at all the issues that we have encountered as a nation over the last 4 years?
For the issue of corruption, you want to look at it from two angles. That's for the majority of voters that we have in this country. Majority of them, do they understand the JAPA deal? Do they understand the issues that anti-corruption campaigners are raising, the issues that the opposition party should have raised that they didn't raise too well? If the ordinary voter understands or can appreciate these issues, then it will go a long way to affect the way they vote. But you look at the issues that have been raised, the issues of corruption within the last 4 years, and they have not been hammered by the opposition as they ought to have done. Unlike in the 2016 elections, corruption became a big issue because the opposition party then, the NPP, was able to drive home the point that the government, the NDC government, was corrupt. And it caught on well with voters. So in 2016, I would say that it counted. But in this particular elections, I don't see corruption playing a major role, because I think that the opposition party has not been able to hammer the issue of corruption very well. And again, the media has also not driven the country in a discussion of corruption issues. Few media houses were able to, but they didn't go deep into the issues of corruption. So on face value, corruption, well, issues are mentioned, but you ask the ordinary voter to mention some corruption deals, and I can tell you that most Ghanaians are unaware of the real issues of corruption that were raised by some institutions. And so for this particular elections, I don't think that corruption will play a major role in deciding who goes back to the Jubilee House or who stays in the Jubilee House.
I see. Well, we'll have to wrap up on this session, but what will be your final words before we move on?
Election 2020, the issues that will drive, or that is driving the voting now, according to the NCC, the issue of education. Education is top on the list, employment, healthcare. So those are the major issues that are driving or that are pushing voters to the polling booth today. And well, I hope that we get the best experience as a country. We deepen the democratic culture and credentials that we have built for ourselves in the sub-region over the years. And at the end of the day, well, we'll get the best president fit for us.
Absolutely. Mr. Vice Azim, what do you have to say finally?
Yes, I think that one of the things that you saw the two parties at different levels was the Okada, the legalization of the Okada, where NDC says when they come into power, they are going to legalize it. And NPP says, no, we said we'll not legalize it, it's going to be there. But more serious things like the Galamsey like this, it doesn't appear to have been properly addressed. You see, and those are the things that affect the revenues of the country, the resources. The unemployed youth think that, or they feel that they have nowhere to go. They have to go and do Galamsey. So what are you going to do to discourage them from doing the Galamsey? That's a very important issue. He talked about job creation. But we just use the word or the term job creation, without giving details of how are you going to create the jobs. If, for example, you decide that you are not going to recruit people into the police service for the next 1 year, then you wait till last year you recruit several times, 4 times to the police service. Those are not jobs that you've created. I mean, it's something that you have delayed for a long time. You didn't deal with it.
Okay.
But just to say that, please, whether you like any party or not, go out and vote. It's a civic responsibility. We must all go out and vote. It doesn't matter who you vote for, I don't care. But make sure that you go and vote. Exercise your civic responsibility.
All right, and I do hope that you would be casting your ballots later today as well. All the very best to all 12 political, 11 political parties and 1 independent candidate. And so 12 presidential aspirants, 883 parliamentary aspirants. I've been speaking to Mr. Vitas Azim. He is the former executive director for anti-corruption civil society organization, Ghana Integrity Initiative, and also Dr. E.T. Amano Latte from the political science department of the University of Education, Winneba. It's been a pleasure interacting with you. And we'll be bringing you more of these as well as live pictures from the ground as, people have already started casting their votes.